everyone, Simon here. Welcome back to this week's episode of Hong Kong Horror. We're taking a quick break from viewer-submitted stories because I wanted to cover a pretty famous scary story. There's been many versions of this one floating around the internet, where the details and locations are slightly different. So some of you might have heard of this one before. I'll retell the story in my usual Hong Kong horror style. Some of the concepts we'll cover today are on the darker side, so viewers' discretion is advised. Please hang around till the end, because as always, we're gonna break everything down from a Chinese cultural perspective. Alright, let's turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive right into this one. Tonight, we're traveling to Indonesia, where a terrifying incident happened to a housekeeper. Let's call her Dewi. Dewi is a middle-aged woman in her 40s. She's worked as a housekeeper for many years now. Everything from housekeeping at major hotel chains to cleaning private client homes. She's done it all. She's made a lot of connections over the years, so after getting laid off as a housekeeper at the hotel that she worked for, she now only cleans private client homes. It was good work with a solid income. It was enough to sustain her and her family's life. If she was lucky, she would find regular clients where she would go to their homes on set days of the week to clean. She was doing pretty well. She had a growing list of regulars, and through those regulars, she would constantly get new occasional clients who would call her whenever they needed a house cleaning once in a while. In this job, Dewi never truly knew who or what was waiting for her at the houses. Dewi lives in Bali. Many of her regular customers were actually expats that lived there. All of them worked remotely in one way or another. Either they worked tech jobs from home, or they were content creators. Dewi loved working for expat clients. Most of the time, they were extremely nice. And most importantly, they paid really well. One day, as she was wrapping up cleaning the house for a regular client, John, he asked her if she had any more capacity to take on one more client. He had an acquaintance from work who recently moved to Bali a few months ago who was interested in finding a regular housekeeper. It would be a once-a-week job. Dewi accepted immediately. She was thrilled to be accumulating so many clients. John gave her the phone number for this acquaintance. His name was Arthur, and he was from America. He worked in big tech, so he had plenty of US dollars to splurge. Dewi and Arthur connected over the phone, and he seemed nice enough. He was interested in finding a cleaner to do a full house cleaning once a week on Saturdays when he was out. They agreed on a price, and Dewi was all set to do her first job for Arthur this upcoming Saturday. When Dewi arrived bright and early Saturday morning, she was greeted by Arthur at the front door. He was a tall, handsome blonde man in his 50s. The property was a stunning 3-story villa. It was newly built, and Dewi could tell that it was expensive. Many of the homes she cleans were beautiful, but this one was on a totally different level. It was probably the nicest house she's ever been to. Arthur was extremely nice. He welcomed Dewi to his home with a big smile and a firm handshake, before giving her a quick tour of the first floor. Everything inside looked expensive. The TV and the sound system alone were probably worth more than Dewi's whole annual salary. Arthur seemed very laid back and told Dewi that she could work at her own pace. He's always out on the weekends, so he won't be home anyways. He'll be giving her the passcode to his front door, where she would just be able to let herself in every Saturday morning. There was no rush to clean. As long as she finished before he got home at night, that was fine. It seemed like it was going to be a pretty easy job. Arthur only had one rule. Absolutely, under no circumstances, was she allowed to go into the master bedroom. That was the only room in the house that was off limits. Everywhere else, she was free to enter and clean. Dewey thought this was a reasonable ask. She figured it was simply where Arthur kept his valuables and didn't want anyone snooping around. It's not an unusual ask. She respected Arthur's request and promised not to go into the master bedroom. After a tour of the house and instructions, Arthur handed Dewey an envelope with cash in it. Normally, clients pay her after the job is finished, but since he was heading out now to go to a party, he trusted her to do a good job and prepaid. Dewey accepted the payment with a big smile on her face, thanking him, and got to work as Arthur left to attend his party. Dewey was so happy that she landed a new client where the job was going to be pretty simple. Arthur's house was already extremely clean as it is. Dewey wouldn't have to do too much major lifting to clean it. As Dewey was wiping down the counters on the first floor, she suddenly heard what sounded like footsteps. She stopped wiping and froze in place to listen carefully. It was definitely footsteps. Someone was walking around upstairs. That's strange, Dewey thought. Arthur didn't mention anything about anyone being home. Maybe he had a guest over in the master bedroom that didn't want to be disturbed? Maybe a girlfriend? Maybe that's why he didn't want her going in there to clean. Dewey shrugged it off and went back to work. It wasn't any of her business who Arthur had over. The footsteps stopped for about 15 minutes or so before she started hearing something else. Humming. It was the sound of a woman humming a song. It was coming from the master bedroom upstairs. Dewey froze once more to listen. Someone was definitely in Arthur's room. It must be a girlfriend. Then, Dewey thought, oh, maybe she's not an official girlfriend. Maybe it was the type of girlfriend you pay for. And maybe that's why he didn't want her going into the master bedroom. It could have been a secret. It's not unheard of. Dewey tried her best not to be nosy, and once again brushed it off, and tried her best to focus on her work. After finishing up the first floor, she made her way up to clean the second floor. As instructed, she cleaned every room other than the master bedroom. After wrapping up, Dewey gathered all her cleaning supplies and went back downstairs. She was done with the job for the day and was putting on her shoes to leave when she suddenly felt a strange feeling of being watched. She paused and looked up. That's when she caught a glimpse of a woman peering down at her from the second floor landing. The woman looked like a local girl, young, in her early 20s. She had messy, long black hair that was matted and clumped together. Once they made eye contact, the woman quickly turned around and ran off. That's weird, Dewey thought to herself. But anyways, it's not her business to worry about what her clients do in their personal lives. Before she left, she took a quick photo of the first floor to send to Arthur, just to show him how clean it was, to let him know that she's wrapped up for the day and that she was heading out. Arthur responded back pretty quickly with a thumbs up icon. He messaged her back saying, "Excellent job. Thank you, Dewey. Please, swing by again same time next Saturday." It felt great to be appreciated. As she was walking away from the house, Dewey pulled out the envelope that Arthur gave her. It included a 50% tip in there. Amazing, Dewey thought. After this initial cleaning session, Dewey became Arthur's regular cleaner, returning once a week. Every Saturday morning, she would be there. It was the same procedure. After the first time, Arthur was never home whenever Dewey came by. She would let herself in with the passcode that Arthur provided her. He would always leave the envelope of cash on the counter for her, with a large tip included every single time. But every time she came to clean, she would still constantly hear the same woman walking around and humming the same song upstairs from the master bedroom. Then came the day that everything changed. Before her shift, Arthur messaged her, "Hey, Dewi, can you also clean the master bedroom today? I haven't slept in there for a long time, so no one's been inside. It's probably extremely dusty." Dewi's heart sank. No one? But she's obviously heard someone up there every time she's been over. She didn't say this though. She didn't want to put Arthur on the spot, because it was obvious that he wanted to keep his love life secret. Of course, Dewi said. She would be happy to clean his master bedroom. Dewi decided to do the master bedroom last. As she was working, she heard the usual humming and walking around coming from the master bedroom. She was already used to it by now, as she heard this woman every single time she's been over. But today, there was something a bit different. As Dewi was cleaning the halls of the second floor, all of a sudden, she heard a huge bang. It was the sound of the master bedroom being slammed shut. It scared the crap out of her. What the heck? She thought. Was she cleaning too loud or something? Where it was annoying the woman inside? After a few seconds of standing there in shock, she went back to cleaning. A little quieter this time, so she doesn't disturb whoever was in the bedroom. Once she finished up and was ready to work on the master bedroom, she gently knocked on the door and said, "Excuse me, ma'am. I've been instructed by Arthur to come inside to clean. Is it okay for me to enter?" No answer. Dewi knocked again. Nothing. Total silence. No footsteps or humming. After about 30 seconds, Dewi tried the doorknob, but then she realized something. The door was locked from the outside. How is that possible? There was a padlock on the door from the outside, so there was no way that it was slamming before. What in the world is going on? Dewi texted Arthur, and he replied apologizing. He forgot that he had locked it, and that the key was downstairs in the kitchen drawer. He told her to go get it, to unlock the lock to get inside. Dewi took the key, she unlocked the padlock, and stepped into a massive master bedroom. The air inside was thick and suffocating. Everything looked like it hadn't been touched in a while. The sheets of the bed were neatly made, as if nobody had slept in there for a long time. There was a thin layer of dust settled over the top of the counters. The woman she kept hearing was nowhere to be found. There was no sign of life in this room at all. Dewi was starting to get really confused and a bit scared at this point. As she was walking into the room, she also noticed a wedding portrait hung on the wall. It was Arthur with a local Balinese woman. That must be his wife, Dewi thought. But as she looked closer, she realized she'd seen this woman before. She looked exactly like the woman that she saw briefly that first day when she looked up. The woman with the long, black, matted hair. Dewi was starting to get freaked out now, because she swore she heard someone in this room just minutes earlier. Is she hiding? Dewi made her way over to the ensuite bathroom to see if the woman could be hiding in there. But when she opened the door and looked into the bathtub, she nearly collapsed. The porcelain was coated in thick, sticky, dark red blood. Fresh blood. Terrified, Dewi backed up so suddenly she tripped over her own feet and fell to the ground. When she looked up again in a panic, there she was. The same woman she saw on the first day here. The one with the long, dark, matted hair. The same woman in the wedding portrait. Except this time, she was standing right in front of her, in the middle of the blood-soaked bathtub. She was covered in blood from head to toe. She stood there, rigidly, staring at Dewi, before suddenly Her expression changed from smiling to crying. Not just regular crying, but wailing. She let out a loud wail and held out her wrists, which had huge slits on them. Dewi screamed. She got to her feet and darted for the exit for the room, but suddenly, the door slammed shut. Dewi screamed for her life as she frantically tried to open it without success. As she was struggling to do this, the woman from the bathroom slowly walked out of the bathtub, dripping blood all over the floor. Her emotions were flipping between smiling and crying every few seconds. It was terrifying, and her expressions were extremely unstable. When she was inches away from Dewi knew this was it. She couldn't escape. She screamed and covered her eyes because she couldn't bear to look at this terrifying woman anymore. She knew this was where she was going to die. As she shut her eyes tight, expecting the end, bracing herself, it never came. Nothing. Silence. A few more seconds go by. Dewi slowly opened one eye, then the other. The bloody woman was no longer in front of her. In fact, there was no blood anywhere at all. The room looked just as it did when she first entered. She glanced over to the bathtub. It was clean. No blood. Not wasting any more time, Dewi tried the door again, and it opened smoothly. Dewi left all of her cleaning supplies behind and sprinted downstairs and ran out of the front door, over to her moped, and went straight home. Arthur eventually texted Dewi that night, furious as to why she left the front door open when she left. Dewi didn't want to bother explaining. She was too freaked out. She didn't plan to go back to that house ever again. Arthur told her that she was fired and not to come back ever again. She was perfectly fine with that. Eventually, Dewi learned the truth from her client that originally introduced her to Arthur, John. One day, when Dewi was done cleaning John's house, he asked, "Hey, Dewi, is everything alright?" Arthur told me what happened, that you just left in the middle of one of your sessions at his place, and even left the front door wide open when you went out. Was that an accident? I could try to explain to him if you tell me what happened. Dewi told John everything she experienced there, and John's face turned pale. He wasn't extremely close to Arthur, but there's been stories. Arthur had married a local woman here in Bali, but after a few months, cheated on her and brutally beat her. When she confronted him about it, he pretty much told her that she can't do anything about it. He had a ton of money, and he could ruin her if she ever decided to tell anyone or to leave him. Heartbroken and humiliated, his wife returned to the villa. She locked herself in the bathroom in the master bedroom one night with a bottle of wine. After one too many drinks, she brutally took her own life in the bathtub with a broken wine bottle. So, Hong Kong horror family, what do you think about this one? Please, pause the video here and share what you think Dewi experienced here in this terrifying situation. Would you have been brave enough to go back to that house after all of that to continue this great paying job? Alright, so what do I think happened here from a Chinese cultural perspective? I think that this dead woman is not simply haunting the villa because she died there. She appears to be trapped inside an unresolved emotional and relational state. One of the things that people often overlook in Chinese ghost lore is that spirits are not always attached to physical places or people. Sometimes they're attached to relationships. There's an old concept that appears throughout Chinese literature and folk belief called Qingzap. Now, Qing doesn't simply mean love. It refers to deep emotional attachment. So emotional feelings like love, hatred, betrayal, regret, obsession, all very powerful emotions. Emotions that the heart cannot always release. 情執 is the inability to release a powerful emotional attachment. 執 means grasping or clinging, so 情執 literally means an emotional attachment that refuses to let go. Her death was not only self-inflicted, but it came after a betrayal, humiliation, violence, and the destruction of her marriage. That means the force keeping her there would not just be fear or sadness. It would be a tangled mess, a combination of love, rage, shame, grief, and the need for someone to acknowledge what happened to her. If you read Chinese supernatural literature from the Tang Dynasty onward, you'll notice something interesting. Not all spirits are wandering because they're confused. Sometimes they're wandering because emotionally, they're still living in the moment that destroyed them. I think this is exactly what's happening here. This is why I wouldn't say that she's haunting Arthur as an individual in the simplest sense. She's haunting the marriage, the bedroom. The master bedroom was the private center of that marriage. And that bathroom was where the relationship finally collapsed into death. From a Chinese ghost lore perspective, these places can become more than locations. They become containers for unfinished relationships. The woman is not wandering through the entire house aimlessly. For the most part, she seems to remain concentrated around the part of the villa where her identity as Arthur's wife, her betrayal, and her death all overlap. The fact that Dewi repeatedly heard footsteps and humming from this room suggests to me that the spirit is not only replaying the moment of her death, she might also be repeating the domestic life that immediately preceded it, still moving through the room as though she belongs there. In many Chinese supernatural accounts, the dead do not always just repeat only the most violent moment of death. They may also continue the routines that had become deeply engraved into them. A person may still do things like sweep a corridor, open a door, call a family member's name, or walk the same path home after work. This kind of repeated behavior can be understood as 杂配美san, meaning the ingrained habits and tendencies have not yet dispersed. 杂配 is often used in Buddhist contexts to describe deeply rooted habits carried by the mind. In ghost lore, this idea can help explain why a spirit keeps performing familiar actions even after death. The woman's footsteps and humming may be fragments of the person she was before her final act, while the bloody bathtub is most likely the death she can't move beyond. I also think Arthur's treatment of the room is very interesting. He has locked it from the outside, stopped sleeping there, and left it almost entirely undisturbed. On a practical level, perhaps he was simply avoiding the room because of guilt or fear, or he could have very likely had some kind of experience in there, similar to what Dewi experienced. But the way I see it, however, is that he has accidentally preserved the exact conditions of the haunting. He's created something called 封房不改, which pretty much means sealing the room without resolving what's inside. Sealing a haunted place is not the same as settling the dead. In fact, leaving the room untouched may actually strengthen the spirit's attachment because no new life, movement, or meaning enters the space. The room remains psychologically frozen around the incident where this woman ended herself. Now, I'm sure it's obvious, but a padlock is not a true spiritual seal. A proper ritual sealing would normally involve religious authority, talismans, prayers, or rites intended to restrict or relocate the spirit. Arthur's padlock doesn't do crap. It only prevents the living from entering. The ghost can still move, hum, and slam things. In a way, Arthur has locked the living out, while leaving the dead completely in control. The room becomes a preserved territory. When Dewi finally enters and recognizes the woman in the wedding portrait, the relationship between her and the spirit changes. Before that moment, Dewi has seen the strange woman, but she doesn't fully understand who it is. Once she sees the portrait, the ghost now has an identity. She's no longer merely someone upstairs. She's the wife of Arthur. In Chinese ghost stories, naming and recognition can be extremely important. Because a restless spirit is often not seeking only to be seen, they may want their status, grievance, and story to be recognized. The portrait tells Dewi that this woman belongs to the house. Now, let's talk about the bloody bathtub. Was it really a bloody bathtub that Dewi saw? Well, at one point in time, yes. But when Dewi looked at it, I don't believe it should be understood as physical blood appearing and disappearing. Dewi was temporarily drawn into the spirit's Seiging, the experiential world of her death. The idea is that a powerful spirit can cause a living witness to perceive the location through the memory and emotional reality of the deceased. The bathroom is clean in the ordinary present, but to the woman, it may still be filled with blood. Dewi briefly sees the room as the ghost continues to experience it. That would explain why the blood disappears so completely once the manifestation ends. Dewi was seeing the same bathroom, but from a different point of time, through the view of the woman. This also helps to explain the woman's unstable expressions. She shifts between smiling and crying while showing Dewi her fatal wounds. I don't think the smile necessarily means happiness or simple madness. In my culture, a spirit shaped by yunhei or grievance can display contradictory emotions because its consciousness has become fixed about a grievance rather than integrated into a stable personality. She may still contain the woman she once was in life, a woman who loved Arthur, the wife who once felt secure in the marriage, but at the same time, she was also the humiliated partner who discovered the betrayal and the abused woman who died in despair. These emotional states no longer unfold in sequence. They exist on top of one another, all at the same time. The smile and the wailing may be different fragments of the same shattered identity, appearing simultaneously. Her act of holding out her wrists is also very interesting to me. She doesn't simply rush at Dewi and attack her. She shows the wounds. Usually, the dead sometimes reveal their seiseng, the appearance or marks of their death, as a form of testimony. The gesture can mean, "This is what happened to me." It forces the witness to confront the hidden truth. Arthur has concealed the story by locking the room and refusing to speak about his wife. The wife uses her body as evidence. That is why I'm not convinced that she intended to kill Dewi. She traps her and terrifies her, but the manifestation ends after Dewi saw the blood, the wounds, and the woman's emotional collapse. This looks less like predation and more like Bikin, forcing someone to witness a series of events. The ghost does not trust that a living person will remain long enough to understand, so she slams the door to prevent Dewi from escaping until the entire scene has played out. Once Dewi has seen it, the room returns to normal and the door opens up again. Arthur's guilt is not only private. His violence and betrayal created what could be called a yunzai, a debt arising from wrongful harm. The character Yun refers to injustice or wrongful suffering, and zai means debt. In Chinese moral and supernatural thought, serious harm creates an obligation that cannot simply be erased by money, distance, or silence. Arthur may continue living comfortably in this life, but the relationship has not been morally settled. His wife's death remains attached to him because he helped create the conditions that led to it. This does not mean Chinese belief will automatically say Arthur caused every aspect of her ending herself. It means his betrayal, threats, and violence formed a grievance around which her spirit remained bound. His wealth may have protected him socially, but ghost lore often imagines the dead as appearing precisely where earthly power failed. The wife could not challenge him safely while alive, so the haunting becomes a form of posthumous accusation. Dewi then becomes something we call ginzengyan, a witness. She's not chosen because the spirit hates her, but because she enters the room and can carry the truth back to the living world. That may be why the woman had already allowed herself to be glimpsed on the landing during Dewi's first visit. She was slowly establishing contact with someone outside Arthur's control. Dewi was a worker, an outsider, and someone Arthur assumed would not ask questions. Ironically, that made her the perfect person through whom the wife's suppressed story could emerge. So, my deeper reading is that this villa contains a spirit bound by love, grievance, and unjust debt. But she's not simply repeating her moment of death like a mindless recording. She appears conscious enough to watch Dewi hide, slam doors, reveal her wounds, and even controlled when the vision begins and ends. At the same time, she's emotionally fragmented and still trapped inside the final collapse of her marriage. She's both a suffering dead woman and a dangerous presence. Chinese folklore doesn't require us to choose between these two descriptions, though. A spirit can be both deeply wronged and still frightening, unstable, and harmful after death. Arthur probably thought he had contained the problem by locking the door and refusing to enter it. From a traditional perspective, however, nothing had actually been settled. There was no acknowledgement, no proper attempt to address the grievance, and no ritual assistance for the deceased. Now, some of you have asked me what you could do if you ever find yourself in a similar situation as Dewi. What can you do to stay safe, and possibly to help the spirit? Well, first of all, the safest approach is to first separate these two questions. You don't try to do both at the same time, while you're still scared, alone, and still inside the location. Your safety comes first. If you're ever in Dewi's situation, the first thing that I would do is try to leave the location first. Don't stay to investigate. Don't challenge the spirit. Just leave for now. As you're leaving, never make promises to the spirit. Some people in these situations panic and say things like, "I'll help you, I'll come back," or even, "Follow me and I'll find someone to help you." If it's not obvious already, please don't say things like this, as it's seen as establishing a relationship or obligation. It's safer to just acknowledge the presence respectfully without inviting attachment. You should say something simple along the lines of, "I didn't come here to offend you," or "I'm leaving now," or "I apologize for trespassing," something like that on your way out. Never insult the spirit. Don't shout religious threats or do things like filming it for entertainment. And also, never take objects from the area, as you don't know which of these items are associated with the death. Anything in that area could be emotionally significant to the spirit. As for helping the spirit, I honestly wouldn't advise doing this unless you're a professional. If you're not a professional and you really want to help, I would suggest seeking the help of a reputable expert from your religion of choice. But let's say a Taoist priest or Buddhist monk were called in to help the spirit. Would they be able to help her? It depends on the situation and the time. It's not always black and white, where the spirit is either an innocent soul that needs to be helped, or they're an evil monster that needs to be destroyed. It's usually a lot more nuanced than that. A ghost can be deeply tragic, but at the same time, also extremely dangerous. These two things are not mutually exclusive. Nothing is permanently fixed. Beings change. A restless ghost today is not necessarily destined to remain one forever. Likewise, a benevolent spirit might not always have been a benevolent spirit since the moment they died. There's a process. This is why we have rituals like Tudo, which often translates as deliverance or helping the deceased cross over. But it's not as simply as casting the ghost out. It can involve scripture recitation, repentance on behalf of the living, offerings, calling the spirit by name, dedicating merit, and asking that she leave the place of death and accept guidance toward a more settled condition. If Buddhist rites are chosen, the emphasis may be on releasing the attachment, dedicating merit, and helping the deceased recognize that continuing to cling to the bathroom and the marriage only extends her suffering. If Taoist rites are chosen, the priest may use memorial petitions, talismans, purification, spirit guiding procedures, and ritual authority to relocate or settle the deceased. If every ghost were beyond help, there would be no reason for centuries of Chinese religious practice devoted to praying for the dead. What determines whether a spirit can be helped is usually why it hasn't moved on. For example, some spirits are simply confused. We sometimes describe someone who dies suddenly as not realizing they've died. They continue walking familiar routes, returning home, or repeating ordinary routines. These spirits are often portrayed as among the easiest to help, because once they recognize their condition and receive the proper rites, they no longer have a reason to hang around. Other spirits are attached by grief. Maybe they couldn't bear leaving their children, or they died while desperately waiting for someone. Again, these spirits are often viewed as capable of eventually letting go once their emotional attachment softens up or proper rituals are performed. Then, there are the spirits whose attachments are built around profound injustice. I would put Arthur's wife in this category. Now, these types of spirits are a lot more complicated and tougher to deal with. We have a saying in Cantonese, Yun Yao Tao, Zai Yao Ju. This literally means every grievance has its source, every debt has its debtor. It pretty much means that suffering doesn't simply disappear. Now, back to our original question, can all spirits be helped? For the most part, yes, but not necessarily right away. Both Buddhist and Taoist traditions recognize that beings have different karmic conditions, levels of attachment, and states of mind. Some may respond readily to ritual and compassion, while others remain consumed by hatred, obsession, or delusion for a very long time. There isn't a universal rule that every spirit accepts help the first time that it's offered. Think about living people. If someone spends decades consumed by hatred, you can't always convince them to change their mindset in one conversation. Chinese religion often applies the same logic after death. Death changes the state of existence, but not the person's personality or mindset. From a Buddhist perspective, our habits don't disappear simply because we die. If someone dies filled with overwhelming hatred or obsession, those mental states themselves become part of what continues. So a spirit may genuinely be offered help, and they still might reject it. In Buddhist stories, this is one reason monks dedicate merit repeatedly over time, rather than assuming a single ritual always resolves everything. For someone like Arthur's wife, I actually think there is hope for her. One thing I notice about her manifestation is that she isn't portrayed as purely predatory. She terrifies Dewi, yes, but she doesn't harm her in any physical or mental way. She doesn't attack her the moment she appears. That tells me she hasn't become completely consumed by malice. She's still expressing pain. This is an important distinction because a spirit that still mourns and wants its suffering recognized is often viewed as far more reachable than one that has entirely lost its humanity. The situations that practitioners worry about the most are those in which a spirit has spent an extremely long period of time feeding on resentment, harming others, and strengthening that attachment over many years. In folklore, such spirits may gradually become what are sometimes called lai guai, vengeful ghosts. The term appears frequently in Chinese literature, but it's worth remembering that not every restless or tragic ghost is automatically a lai guai. It's a label usually associated with ghosts whose grievances have hardened into persistent vengeance. But even with these tougher cases though, Chinese traditions generally stop short of saying that they are beyond all possibility of redemption. A Taoist priest might focus on subduing or relocating such a spirit through ritual authority. A Buddhist monk might emphasize continuing compassion, repentance, and dedication of merit. The methods will be different, but both traditions typically leave open the possibility that transformation is still possible, even if it's difficult. Thank you, Hong Kong Horror family, for making it all the way to the end of this week's video. I hope you all stay safe and never find yourself in Dewi's situation. But if you do, don't panic. You'll be fine. Have a good night, everyone. We'll speak again next week.